the communist thing. Yeah, this thing about the wall, but we're going to stop the funding of the wall. You got to be crazy to say that. Let people come in the United States through a wall, and then they lie about you. They're not registered. They're not citizens. And we got to feed them and clothe them. I sympathize with people, who are disadvantaged, but not to the extent that some people, want to do it, but not that they care. It's just politically to gain power. And it is not fair to the rest of us in our communities. And to me, it's simple. And if you could contradict that, then you're welcome to call me and tell me about it. But don't come up against me unless you have the facts, okay? Because I don't want to waste time. People, if you're uninformed and you don't have facts and talk a lot of stupidness on the air that I hear sometimes, I'm not interested, okay? See you tomorrow morning at 7.
We'll know after those election results are in which party controls the U.S. Senate. This morning, a key Senate Democrat, Dick Durbin, is calling for a criminal investigation of President Trump's weekend phone call with Georgia's top election official, during which the president pressured the official to find him votes that would overturn Joe Biden's win in the state. The AP's Ben Thomas.
In an audio recording obtained by the Associated Press of a call Saturday between the president, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, and others, the president says,
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state, and flipping the state is a great testament to our country.
In the call, Trump repeats a litany of claims of alleged voter fraud and irregularities, to which Raffensperger responds,
well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Biden senior advisor Bob Bauer calls the recording irrefutable proof of Trump pressuring and threatening an official in his own party to overturn the election. Ben Thomas, Washington.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says President-elect Biden's plan for 100 million coronavirus shots in his first 100 days in office is workable. Vaccinations have been going slower than hoped, but Dr. Fauci says things are ramping up.
The goal of vaccinating 100 million people in the first 100 days is a realistic goal. We can do 1 million people per day.
He was on ABC's This Week. Iran has seized a South Korean tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, alleging oil pollution. It arrested the crew. This is AP News.
This is Adler Fonsi Danistor, your host of a new program that is coming, Connecting the Dots, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. every Monday morning on WSDA, the station of choice, 1340 on the dial. Again, Adler Fonsi Danistor, Connecting the Dots, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. every Monday morning on none other than WSDA, Lucky 13. If you from the put your hands up.
Please log in to your mobile phone, television, computer for live streaming or your nearest radio. It's now time to listen to Connecting the Dots. People come, let we go. Turn up the radio. Turn it up. This is the People Show. No matter where we go. Connecting people. We all love you. We are here for you. We can hear you. Connecting people. People come, let we go. Turn up the radio. Turn it up. This is the People Show. No matter where we go. Connect the dots, family. Connect the dots, unity. Connect the dots, for you and me. Connect the dots.
Good morning. I just wanted to say good morning to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Good morning to all those folks out there who are actually tuning in live, Facebook, and just those of you who are sitting in your living rooms just contemplating. I want to say Happy New Year. This is my first broadcast since the advent of a new year. And, it's really, I just wanted to say to each and every one of you, I know many of you have resolutions for the new year. And, Yeah, resolution should come about just about every day. If you decided one day into the year that you wanted to change the pattern of the things that you do, you just do it. So I just wanted to say Happy New Year to you and encourage you to continue to stay firm, stay resilient, stay focused, whatever you do. Continue to exercise all those things to actually prevent the spread of this coronavirus or COVID-19 here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, because I know it hasn't been easy anywhere. So we all have our set of challenges. So I say good morning again to you. And just to do some recap, so just to make some general announcements, I wanted to talk about Sunday on the Sun. Sunday on the Sun is a program that we want to have on the beach of Cookie Point to afford people the opportunity to come in and experience our way of life, but also to highlight, to put in the national spotlight, Cookie Point Beach, which is, I think by now it should be one of the top 10 beaches in the world. I mean, the ambience down there, the crystal blue water, and the list goes on and on. And now that I'm reminded, I want to insert in here real quick, Catch of the Day. Catch of the Day located at Cookie Point Beach. It's one of the, I mean, when you talk about surf and turf, but especially the seafood, Catch of the Day, the lobster, the conch, the wilks when in season, and I mean, the list goes on, but the fresh seafood is something to talk about, something to experience. So all of that we want to incorporate in Sunday on the Sun, where we would actually, you know, be highlighting a whole lot of stuff, but also engaging visitors and even residents, you know, of the Virgin Islands, that they would have an opportunity to express themselves on anything that they want to express themselves on. But we want to talk about art and craft and music and that type of stuff, and just incorporate it into what we're going to be doing down at Sunday on the Sun and Cookie Point Beach, brought to you by Catch of the Day. I think it's something that you're going to enjoy, and I truly look forward to being the host of that as well, where we're going to be live streaming onto 7 different social platforms for the purpose of really being able to reach people, but to highlight the U.S. Virgin Islands in general. Now, COVID-19, and you know, the newspaper have the 24th death in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I know that has to be of concern to many Virgin Islanders, and it has to be very concerning to many Virgin Islanders, because you never know when it's going to be on your doorstep, and God forbid that you know, it spreads any further in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But while I'm speaking about that, I mean, my personal experience in traversing the territory, just frequenting different places where a lot of tourists frequent, I'm just astonished to see the number of tourists that we have in the U.S. Virgin Islands. But, you know, there's a good and a bad in this, upside and a downside from an economic standpoint. Of course, we want to encourage people with a tourism destination, but sometimes you have to be careful at what expense. And I was just surprised to see the number of people frequenting Cookie Point, I mean, visitors, and the number of people. I went to a restaurant last night called The Market, and that's the one over there at Elysian Hotel. And I was surprised to see the number of people that you just had over there. I mean, it was just amazing to see people from different destinations. In fact, I engaged a couple of folks just to learn where they're from. And Montana was one, New York, New Jersey, and as far as California. And I was surprised, like I said, and I think what is happening here, and this is just my little input in terms of my observation, most of the other Caribbean destinations have really closed their doors for fear of the spread of this COVID-19. And the U.S. Virgin Islands, of course, remain open to allow for people to come here. So their first choice and only choice at this time may be the U.S. Virgin Islands to come and visit. So we can only hope that, you know, that we continue to exercise, and I would often encourage exercise the precautionary measures to ensure the protection of yourself and your family. I wanted to just switch the subject here quickly and just say a little hail up to a lot of people out there. You know, I got Pooch in pressing guns, and I have to start with him. Pooch, I haven't forgotten you, but I'll get around to it shortly. I'll be back to you with exactly what I promised you. You got June, you got all of them in Paul and Piercing Gardens. Of course, that's where I started, and I say it quite often. I got down in Cookie Point Beach, and I don't want to start calling names because I might forget, but you know who you are. Down on Cookie Point Beach, and where I go for a little food here and there, Petra and Caroline, you know, and the rest of the folks down there on Cookie Point Beach, where you can get some of the best food, local dishes that you can find. Now, I know many of you have been in tune with a lot of stuff that have been transpiring here in the Virgin Islands relative to even this borrowing bill that it had last week, a special session, as many would describe it as a lame duck session. And in that lame duck session, of course, the senators really didn't adopt the amendments that was being proposed, which was supposed to have been this borrowing bill. And there's a lot of Virgin Islanders that have reached out to me because a lot of folks are not really familiar with bonds, the PFA, and all of that stuff, you know. And I can tell you I have a little history here with the PFA, when the PFA was created during the Alexander Farrelly time. And there were concerns with the way the system was shaped. But I thought that it was important enough to share with you, you know, what the PFA was intended to do and when it was created. And that's the Virgin Islands Public Finance Authority, the PFA, or the authority I'll call it, was created by Act number 5365 as a public corporation and autonomous governmental instrumentality operating on behalf of the government of the Virgin Islands. Its primary duties, and I want you to pay close attention to this, its primary duties are: one, to aid the government of the Virgin Islands or the U.S. Virgin Islands in the performance of its fiscal duties, and two, to raise capital, public or private, for essential public projects, and three, to create programs and enter into contracts which will support the financing needs of the government, promote economic recovery, and contribute to the stability of the territory's economy. Now, the reason I'm highlighting that this morning, because a lot of folks are a little confused when it comes to the different intricacies and the specifics of bonding and financing, the role of the Public Finance Authority, how they engage with the Senate. Now, over the years, there's been a lot of criticism of that particular thing, and I know that the senators, and I will say this publicly, they had a valid concern. They had a valid concern in many, many respects, and I'm hopeful that even the Finance Committee start to really dive into it and evaluate, and not just necessarily entertain correspondence coming from outside that seek to enlighten the senators before they make a decision, a major decision like that, whether it's relative to bond counsel, relative to consultants, relative to anything. But there's going to have to be some level of transparency created here. And I think it's important that the Senate start to really look at the PFA, look at its ethical standards, try to see if they could achieve some level of full disclosure. Because remember, one of the things that I mentioned here, and just going back again to that of the PFA, the PFA actually has a platform on its website even to entertain investors. And if you look at some of the information of the that is on the website, number one, it needs to be updated, and there's some clause in there that is of great concern to me. You know, when I read it, to interpret it in terms of investor and investor responsibility and what you're supposed to adhere to versus the information that is forthcoming to that entity to determine whether or not you are a perfect player or investor for the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this is taken off of their own website, the Virgin Islands Public Finance Authority investor information, where you go in there and you're able to extract information. But there's a section here which is item 3. And item 3 actually speaks about the information is subject to change without notice and may not be updated. I'm not sure what that is supposed to mean, but let's say it has its purpose and its reasoning. But then when you look at the caption below it, it says the Virgin Islands Public Finance Authority is under no obligation to update any information included on the investor page. The information and expression of opinion herein are subject to change without notice, and the posting of information on this website does not imply that there has been no change in affairs of the Public Finance Authority or any related entities. Now, that seemed like it's a disclaimer to me, and it's worth looking into. And then it has here number 6, investment decisions. The investment page is not intended to replace any information or consultation provided by a professional financial advisor, other than the specific information presented on the investor page. No other information on our website is intended to be the basis of or should be relied upon in making an investment decision. Okay, I understand that one. Then it goes on to number 9, acknowledgement of terms of use, which I understand for those respective investors, and this is what the investors would be agreeing to. It says acknowledgement of terms of use. I have read the foregoing terms of use and expressly agree to each of the terms. I also understand that, as indicated above, official forms of disclosure documents are available elsewhere, and that the material information important to making of informed investment decisions may have been posted elsewhere. Now, and then they go on to say they agree. Now, information was forthcoming to the Senate, and the Senate, of course, entertained and read into record a letter relative to an advisor or even, well, relative to an advisor or investor. And I think people got thrown for a loop, and especially the administration. Now, it's obvious that we are in critical times, and there are decisions that will have to be made. I can tell you that some of the issues that I have and concerns that I have is when you look at the negotiated or what they establish as an interest rate over 5%. It would seem to me that if you're talking about the consolidation of debt or restructuring your debt, as they call it, that you would try to achieve the lowest possible interest rate to ensure that down the road that you're not negatively impacted. Because remember now that, and we could get into the forecasting, the variables, and all that type of talk, but I think for the majority of you Virgin Islanders, you want to hear it as clear and simple as you possibly can, because at the end of the day, this actually affects the livelihood of Virgin Islanders, because it speaks to, we often say that if the government is not prospering, the people's lives could potentially be placed in peril. And that is, in fact, a true saying. And it is a true saying because the one thing that you don't want is for us to start headed down that road or on the cliff of bankruptcy in any way that we can't pay income tax returns or refunds, because not every return is a refund, that we can't fulfill our obligation, that we can't provide essential services to the community, and that could be problematic because it is a known fact based on any study, and you could go out there and do your own research. Based on any study, it would have clearly tells you that if an economy is not doing well, crime goes up, because you're talking about the unemployment going up. And if people are not working and people are not able to really afford to live a decent life, sometimes they are compelled to navigate the wrong direction, and we don't want that to happen. You know, over the weekend I also, and if I may, it's a happy belated birthday again to Alexander Anthony Farley. That when we're talking about the PFA, it was in 1988 that it was Alexander Farley that sent down to the Senate then and actually spearheaded what you call the government, I think it was the Government Capital Improvement Act of 1988. And some of you may be able, if Jimmy O'Brien is listening this morning, I'm quite sure he's another individual who was an administrator that can share a little history with us relative to that Capital Improvement Act of 1988. But it was then the PFA was created. Now, let's fast forward today, because the PFA, as a public corporation and autonomous governmental instrumentality of the government of the Virgin Islands, I've always felt that they still should be held to certain standards for full disclosure. I mean, over the years, many of us know that there have been contracts executed for consultant services, invisible consultants, to consultants who may not have been strong in any particular discipline to make a valuable contribution to the PFA and eventually to the people of the Virgin Islands. And you beg to ask the question, has the PFA really been audited to determine whether or not it's operating in the best interests of Virgin Islanders? Because the PFA, as that autonomous government instrumentality, possess a high level, as I would say, of independency, and often feel that they're not beholden to providing any information outside of what they want to provide to the people of the Virgin Islands. So I think that Virgin Islanders, we have to be spirited and hopeful that the Senate start to dive into this matter, because it's not the first time that the PFA and issues with the PFA has actually surfaced. And it's important that the legislature, who's supposed to be the watchdogs, the first branch of government, not just legislators, but have oversight responsibility to really look in to the activities of the PFA and determine whether or not it's operating in our best interests. We got under the PFA agreements with, they actually are over VINGN, West Indian Company, and that's just to name a few. So you got VINGN. Is VINGN performing at the level that they should be performing as an autonomous entity as well that was structured under the PFA? Because remember now that the governor serves as the chair of both, the chair of the PFA and the chair of VINGN by virtue of the position that he holds. So again, we come back. We're going to have to start connecting these dots, because you have Whit O'Brien, who's operating under the PFA. You got entities that was contracted by Whit O'Brien. Well, Whit O'Brien is supposed to be held to a certain standard and certain practices and follow ethical standards, and hope that they have good ethical standards in place. But there is so much involved here, because when the PFA was created, for a lot of people, inclusive of myself, I always felt that the PFA was was an entity that was created that would in fact serve good. But you know what they say about power? Power was created to help people. It was not created to hurt people. And sometimes when you have, for the love of absolute power, power falls into the wrong hands. You have total chaos. And you may have even casualties along the way. And I'm bringing this up because I believe that there is a need to really take a careful look at the PFA and how they're conducting business. Because after I heard that the correspondence read into the record by the Senate President, I was quickly reminded of some of the past and some of the past activity that have taken place associated to the PFA. So, again, we're revisiting that. I know Virgin Islanders want transparency. You want to know what's going on. You know, because there's a lot of Virgin Islanders out there. When we look at how these companies that have benefited from the Public Finance Authority, how they're conducting themselves, it seems like it's a select few that is getting rich, and there's no significant spill-off to the actual hard-working Virgin Islanders. And you know why I'm bringing that up and I'm saying that this morning? Because let's put it in perspective. You got a PFA that float in bonds. You got government employees, hard-working government employees, who received an 8% cut. We talking about borrowing, we talking about refinancing, we talking about restructuring, but I'm not seeing a clear path or a plan to really correct what was wrong or what was perpetrated against Virgin Islanders. That 8% cut was illegal. I said it from the beginning. They still forge forward. And where are we today? And then the list goes on right down the line talking about hard-working Virgin Islanders. You got a lot of people out there that can't get their income tax refunds to date. So if you're talking about a government operating effectively for the people of the Virgin Islands, income tax refunds should be paid on time. Money's placed into circulation. There are a lot of people that wait for that windfall, from teachers to the average person that wait for that windfall and to do what? To assist them with preparation for a new school year, that is teachers, moving on to even parents preparing their kids for the new school year and buying uniforms. That windfall comes in handy. That is not a favor to the taxpayers. It's not a favor. It's a fundamental right that you're supposed to be paying them on time. Look at the comparison between when people get their income tax refunds stateside versus the U.S. Virgin Islands. You got to be waiting until some public announcement, a big press release that say that income tax refunds are going to be paid and so did. As though it's a favor. It's a fundamental right. So I'm not understanding this. So if we're talking about restructuring the Virgin Islands debt, it has to be all-inclusive. That spill-off, if you want to call it, I don't like to use the term, trickle-down effect to Virgin Islanders should be taking place. So I'm sorry, some telephone. I'm on my little soapbox this morning. So let me just start to entertain phone calls, because I know a few people was trying to call in on the line, and I have to turn my ring up so I could be at least be aware that phone calls are coming in. But you're welcome to call here, WSDA, this morning. The number to call is 340-774-1340, 1340, here at WSDA. And yet, continuing on my soapbox with this, the bonding issue. And I speak of that bonding issue because it could have a significant ripple effect. I remember when I got involved in Puerto Rico. I just went over, to visit Puerto Rico and had some friends over there that asked me to get involved in a couple of things in Puerto Rico. And they asked me for my opinion when PR was getting ready to relinquish or lease the airport out, which was one of their main revenue-producing projects, which was the airport and the rent that was coming in. So that was recurring revenues, and that was lost. They went ahead and they leased the airport out, and now no recurring revenues. What transpired after that? And this was from back in 2013. What started to transpire after that, because their forecasts was false. The forecast and the projections was on the high level. Didn't even seem realistic. And when the time came down the road from the leasing, they started to sort what? A loan. And they claimed back then that they were teetering on the level of bankruptcy. Teetering on the level of bankruptcy. What did we hear eventually? The conclusion was they were filing or claiming bankruptcy to see if the federal government would forego some of the loans that they had, but not realizing that the bonding market, everything was affected. And everything was affected to the point where today they're still grappling, and what they're relying on today is outside investment. An investment for the purpose of luring people to that island. I mean, they have even embarked on a robust film industry. So now let's come back to the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're talking about borrowing at the highest interest rate, not at a lower interest rate. Now, the government has a lot of obligations. They have an obligations to the GRS system, which we're hoping, and as they have indicated, the medicinal marijuana, which has transformed or been amended to be recreational at this point. And people are going to question, what is the distinction between medicinal and recreational? I mean, by virtue of the words itself, is self-explanatory. But it still begs the question, in terms of the distribution and in terms of the possession, what the levels are going to be. But that's another story that we could discuss in another program. But getting back to this borrowing. So there are several questions that I would beg to ask relative to bonding and the Virgin Islands Public Finance Authority. And that is there ethical standards in place? 2, are they exposed to organizational conflict of interest? Have they been exposed? Are they exposed? I mean, how much money does the PFA really control? I mean, I pulled one of the last financial reports that they had that was conducted by BDO. And I was really amazed, and I'm going to get into that discussion later on. I was really amazed by one of the notes that BDO have in that financial report that has to do with the internal controls, which to me was semantics, and was obvious. It was obvious that they were imposing that play along to get along. Because, I mean, when you look at these contracts that these companies have, it's millions of dollars. Do you think that they're going to be open and consistent about a lot of things? No. But that's going to be another discussion that is going to come up forward. I just want to hear from you, the public, in terms of your understanding of the borrowing. What do you feel about the borrowing? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we shouldn't borrow. I just think that if you're going to borrow, it has to be the perfect situation, because if it's not, down the road, it could come back to haunt us in a worse way. Because, you know, my limited background, I'm going to call it my limited background, one of the few people that is certified in city management and have pursued that of a master's in public administration. And one of the things that we studied during the course is financial statements, and preparing a serious financial statement and being able to forecast and do projections and see consistencies over a period of time using a 5-year measurement, for example. And I could get deep into this stuff, so I pretty much have an idea what to look for when I'm looking at those financial reports. But they you know, going on, continuing with the questions that I had, is that who are the members of the PFA? I went to the website and I only saw the secretary name listed, and I'm not sure if that's for a reason. The secretary, Mr. Keith O'Neill, who has been there from 2009, who also serves on VINGN, on the VINGN board. And you see, in connecting these dots, I just want to learn who the entire membership, who's all the members of the Public Finance Authority, And I saw that Kirk Carlwood, who's the former commissioner now of Department of Finance, was actually on the PFA as well by virtue of the position that he holds. He is no longer there. Now I've heard some names, thrown in the fray as who substituted him. And I think, those folks now operating under the PFA, I'm wondering what standards are they held to? Can they freely apply their expertise in some instances in disseminating information to the public and doing what is necessary to render good decisions? And, there's been some changes with the PFA in terms of the amount of, or up to what amount in a contract that they can extend and for what purpose. And I could understand some directors, executive directors, having a free hand or a little bit of flexibility to make certain decisions. But on the higher side of things, when I say the higher side, I'm talking about these $1 million contracts. It begs to ask, what is the status? What are the status of Waite O'Brien, the strategy group, Ernst & Young, BDO, and all these companies? I think the Senate should consider bringing them all in and asking the pertinent questions relative to the finances of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Because remember that when it comes to bonds and making decisions relative bonds and having to manage assets, and I mean the list goes on and on, that Herculean responsibility that they have still needs some kind of oversight. And I'm not just talking about reports submitted and in vague terms, and there's specific information in a report that you can't clarify, you can't quantify, you can't, it goes on and on in terms of examination. These things need to be carefully examined because we're talking about the future of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I would hate to see that down the road we make such decision in borrowing, and it's not the perfect package, it's not the perfect players, and then the inevitable outcome is on the front of our doorstep. So, Virgin Islanders, I know that each and every one of you have laid or listened to different messaging that have been provided to you, whether it's via radio, via press conferences, via social media, that you do some research for yourself and start extracting and pulling information, not just off of the PFA website, but information cross-referencing to determine whether or not there exists consistency. Because even with the budget analysis that they do on the different respective department, they go based on information that they are provided. Now, a few years ago, the Senate considered getting access to the FMS system, which would give them real-time figures to determine whether or not, if you're going to appropriate money for any particular cause, entity, department, that you have information readily available in real time. Because you see, the real time would make a world of a difference, because you don't know if there was a drawdown for some particular program, and the balance that you have that was provided to you weeks ago, months ago, is no longer accurate. So access to the FMS system in Department of Finance will give you real-time figures. So, I can go on and on based on my experience, based on me being a former chair of the Finance Committee, balancing two budgets for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I could go further and further, but I've never been the type of candidate or person to play along to get along. If I feel something is wrong, I say exactly how I see it. But I also came with information that can qualify or justify the statements that I make. And I'm just begging Virgin Islanders to sort of start doing a little research if you can, because I think that it could really, really be helpful to you in making your own personal or providing your own personal opinion about what you heard and whether or not it's in the best interest of the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I know these telephone lines this is the next morning that we're having a little challenge here with the phones here. Let me, again, folks, the number to call here, WSD, is 340-774-1340. I know we have one line, and that one line sometimes gets caught up. And that's why when you're calling sometime and the lines are multiple lines and people don't hold long, it rings busy at times. But I could go along speaking about this issue. We have a lot of issues here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, just like anywhere else. But I don't think anywhere else have issues with their income tax refunds, have issues with an 8% that was taken from employees. That was like corporate robbery. That was like highway robbery. That was like abuse, that you have taken advantage of a group of government employees, and I'm hopeful that they start figuring out a way to reimburse all these workers this 8%. You know, I think they're actually hoping for you to actually forget about it. How could you forget about something that was wrongfully taken away from you, especially when it comes to money, finances? If there's ever a period that government workers can in fact use that money, is now. For those of you who received the cut, because there was a threshold here who was making in excess of a certain amount of money. I'm trying to remember, I think it was 45,000, no, 45 or 35, can't remember what it was, but there was a majority of government employees that actually were negatively impacted by this deduction of 8% from their checks. And amazing how someone can do so much wrong and still walk around like nothing had actually transpired. I'm surprised Virgin Islanders are not screaming about it still and reminding some of these players who cut your salary like that and know that it was illegal. And for what purpose? Back then, we floated bonds, and that's another thing that has to be reported on. Your rum revenues. We talk about the rum revenues, but what they don't tell you is that even with the Diageo deal and us being able to get Diageo here to the U.S. Virgin Islands, it's an obligation by the government. And you ask, if we're subsidizing the molasses, if we're paying for the advertising of the rum or subsidizing that as well, what is the return on the investment? Of course, again, the PFA. You have to go to the PFA and hope that the PFA provides you with all the revenues, make the subtractions in terms of the expenses or the obligations that the government have to determine what is the level, what is the return on investment for the U.S. Virgin Islands. All this is controlled by the Virgin Islands Public Finance Authority. And I'm just trying to be the vehicle of enlightenment here, folks. So if you have any questions, call me and ask me. If I don't know, I'll do some research. It's like Adi was saying this morning. And I have to commend Adi because nobody wants to hear the other side of the story. We feel that the election is done. But in actuality, if we're talking about promoting democracy, isn't it fair to hear both sides of the story? It's only but fair, even if we don't want to hear it. Because, around here, nobody wants to hear about Trump and his campaign or his crusade to overturn an election. Nobody around here wants to hear that. Most of the people around here feel that we wanted him gone, he's gone. Let that be a memory, a part of history that we wish not to remember. But on the other side of the coin, when you're talking about democracy, the people have a right. So I applaud Adi, although a lot of folks might feel that it's the most unpopular thing that he could do to play recordings, reports of Donald Trump and his crusade and statements that different syndicated programs in the United States are providing this information to the public. That is democracy. It's only but fair. Because if you're playing one side of the story all the time and not the other side, to me, it's giving a clear appearance that you're trying to manipulate the audience. I don't think that's fair at all. I think people deserve to hear both sides of the story because democracy promotes that. Freedom of speech, not for a select few, but for all. So I applaud him for playing those recordings and giving people an opportunity to hear the different arguments coming from different quarters. And although the president had been unsuccessful, number 45, unsuccessful in the campaign, he's still in office, he's still in public office. And when you talk about democracy, democracy is not stymied by who's in charge or by any particular time. Democracy should exist every day, every hour, every minute. So I listen to both sides of the story, and it's no different, folks, from if you decided that you wanted to get information from CNN and you flip over from CNN to Fox News or to any other news outlet that you could find. That's how it is. You can't expect for one, to listen to one side of the story and not hearing the other side in its entirety. It's not healthy for anyone. So, for whatever it's worth, that's just my little 2 cents. I know Adi, I didn't wear a sweater for Adi this morning, but he's doing. I'm happy to hear he's doing well, and happy Happy New Year to you again, Adi, if you're listening out there, because I know you're tuned in to these programs. But this morning, we were discussing this issue of the PFA, and I see that it's not too many people. And I want to tell you why not too many people are chiming in the discussion. That issue sounds extremely confusing for a lot of Virgin Islanders to talk about bans, to talk about a PFA. And, it's a responsibility of some of us radio hosts just in trying to qualify or trying to clarify certain things, to try to sometimes simplify it as much as we possibly can, because not that, we have some very aware voters out there. We have some very aware listeners out there. But not everyone understands some of the dynamics of this stuff with the financing and the bonds, financial statements and all of this stuff. They want to hear how much we owe. We get a loan. How much is the loan? What is the interest on the loan? For how many years? What do we have to give up for that loan? And the list goes on. And those are questions that could come from just about anyone, any quarter. And that's the question that I've heard over the weekend leading up to. Even this morning, I received a call from someone, and the question they asked me, is there any money in that borrowing package or the legislation earmark? I know we're hearing that there's monies earmarked to the GRS, but is there monies earmarked to pay back the 8%? Is there money earmarked for income tax refunds? I mean, there's a lot of programs. Is there any monies in there earmarked to bring all the police officers on step? I mean, and it goes on and on. So I truly understand why sometimes, folks can get a little confused with these issues. And yes, it is democracy, and every entity reserve the right under democracy, under the Constitution, to be able to provide their opinion and their statement, whether it's a qualified position or not. and sometimes that's where it requires us at Virgin Islanders, and I'm just saying in general, that we pay close attention and do some due diligence of our own to really take the nonsense and take sense out the nonsense and take sense out the nonsense, and it goes on and on and on, if you understand what I'm trying to say. But there is some hope in the Virgin Islands, and we say hope because we all want to see things get better. We all want to be able to drive on good roads. We all want to be able to afford, and experience a different quality of life in the Virgin Islands. And I'll be honest enough to tell you, in my personal opinion, in moving around in this community, and I'm not just talking about St. Thomas, I'm talking about St. Croix, I'm talking about Water Island, I'm talking about St. John. Just walking around, it seemed as though the quality of life have diminished over the last few years. I mean, look at us from the hurricane. You had an administration, we had a nice waterfront being, that is, hopefully will be completed in the next few months. We have, I give credit to former Governor Kenneth Mapp that got that project, but it seems so that things have slowed down to the point where it's like we're still navigating. So let me go to the lines, whether pro, cons, whatever it is, I entertain any call. Good morning, you're on the air, connect the dots.
I'm connecting the dots. How are you, sir?
I am fine, I'm blessed. Happy New Year to you.
The same to you and everyone else, and belated happy birthday again. You had a good birthday.
Thanks. I had a wonderful birthday. I thank all those folks who called me. It was plentiful birthday wishes, and I was quickly reminded that I'm still appreciated by some people, and we're getting older, and I don't pray for material things. I pray for wisdom, because I think that wisdom is the most valuable thing you can have. Because remember that wisdom is what guides us through life and compels us to make the most prudent and sound decisions.
That's true. All of the wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and God, graces, and mercy too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what subject you got today?
The subject that we're discussing today is the bonding and the PFA borrowing. I actually broke down, and you should have a history of this. You recall in 1988 when Alexander Farrelly had created a PFA.
That's good.
Well, that's what we're talking about this morning, because the Senate deliberated, and once again, they obviously didn't embrace the governor's amendments to the previous bill that he had passed, and they rejected it once again. And I've heard some of the arguments, and the arguments, are sound arguments coming from the Senate. But that's what we're talking about, and I'm just, trying to enlist opinions.
Let me ask you something, if I may.
Sure.
Because I've been asked the same question out of some folks in the mainland, particularly the nation's capital. Why couldn't some new vehicle thing or another? I don't have a copy of the bill, I don't know what it is. Some folks in Washington was reading it to me. Couldn't what is wanting to be done through this, what they call some new vehicle thing or something, I don't know. Couldn't it be done through the PFA?
Well, it's the PFA involved, and the PFA have to facilitate it. And that's why I read into the record the responsibility of the PFA.
Yeah, but the structure, as I understand it, it's going to be I know about quasi.
Yeah, I know.
Body. Huh?
Yes, and
go ahead, I'm sorry.
If you provide me with your email address, I could send you the enabling legislation or the legislation that was proposed, so you could read it for yourself.
I would appreciate it. It's alnibs47@hotmail.com.
Okay, just send it to me through Messenger, Facebook, or something. Just post it, put it in my inbox.
I got the number.
And I'll email it to you. Okay?
Good, I'll do that. Because, like I said, I don't understand how I understand this. It's more than a question. That is a quasi.
Yeah.
The governor alone, and he named the members, and they report to nobody. I mean, a board of directors. I've been with board of housing authority, and I reported to the board. The board ultimately is responsible to the people and the governor. I don't know. Maybe after I read it, then I could make a better understanding. Because people got my head swell with this thing. I don't know. When it first came out, I made a joke and people thought I was being funny. Kenneth Knapp, former governor, had buy some kind of special vehicle. And when they started, I mean, the very wording of this thing make it sound so rudimentary. A special vehicle thing. I said, that's a special vehicle already. What more special vehicle we want again? You know, I mean, I quite understand what it is. I'm being facetious. But they probably don't call me the tongue idiot, but they could call me that all they want. I don't know. Anyway, I would listen.
Okay. Well, we have some more calls coming in. Thanks for calling, okay?
Sure.
Happy New Year to you once again. Yeah, there's a lot of folks that are unclear about exactly what these amendment, what the legislation is intended to do. And, you know, sometimes you got to be careful just grabbing at levels of authority and that independency when it comes to government. And this is why I often tell people that, you know, I hear folks saying often that the government should operate like a business. Government cannot really operate, as a business. They could operate in some respects like a business, but they can't operate as a business. And I'll explain to that after this next call. Good morning, you're on the air. Connect the dots.
Good morning. I'm listening to your show, and I just have a question.
Sure.
I understand, like, you got to say to the story, to every story, but the thing is, my thing is this. The legislature have concerns relative to the 3 different times that the government sent down this bill. Everything is no. For whatever reason, they you know, but where is the yes? My whole thing is it's a fact that the retirement system is hemorrhaging. We could sit here and talk all about what's right and wrong, but ain't nothing more right or factual than the GERS is hemorrhaging. They suggested that they take a 42% cut. Of course, the legislature is in control of that. But at some point in time, if something don't happen, what is the legislature going to do when there is no money in the GERS?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I'm saying is, it is hemorrhaging every month. That's a fact. You know, that is a fact. Something got to be done. Okay, if they have challenges relative to what the bill is, fine. But that concern cannot be no more worse than if the whole thing fall down.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing, and relative to, in terms of the budget and stuff like that, relative to what the money is allotted for, regardless of what it is, isn't the legislature have control over the money?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, one of the concerns I understand is before, not this last one who went down. Why when they disapproved the second one was it didn't have provisions in the bill saying that the money specifically is going to the GRS. That's what one of the concerns the legislature had. But it don't matter because they still got control over the money if it did come through. Second of all, I understand that one of the reasons that the bill, no mention of the monies going to retirement within the bill, because my understanding is if that was in the bill for pension system, automatically the interest rate would have been higher. So, you know, so my whole thing is if we get some money, regardless where we get it from, regardless what any governor do or say, is the legislature control the money? So I don't see what's the challenge with them, with that part. And I'm going to tell you, like I say, my whole thing is this. We could sit here and find everything was wrong with it, but it cannot be as worse as what's coming down the pipe. And if the GERS board and the actuary suggested had the way, we would have got 42% cut this month. It's just that they ain't got the authority to do it. The legislature does. But that don't negate the fact that it is hemorrhaging. Anyway, done. That's why
your points are well taken. Okay, let me start with telling you that your points are well taken. We know that there's issues and problems to address, and they're immediate problems. They're real. But I think that to put things in perspective, and this is not in defense of the legislature or anyone, this is just trying to apply some a realistic approach to even responding to your question. If I have a loan, right? Let me just share this with you. This is just my perspective, because you're talking about a couple of items that they had a concern with. Now, if you go back to the previous thing that the Senate had passed, where I believe that it was one of the senators that put a cap on the interest. That cap on the interest was placed there for a particular reason. I'll tell you what the reason was. If you're talking about a consolidation or liquidating debts, and you're going to borrow, and even if the concern is not, there is no specific language about the monies being earmarked to the GRS system. So as far as they know, the Senate, they can determine what they will give the GRS system. But, well, notwithstanding all of that, let's come back to the interest rate. If I go to the bank and I borrow money, and let's say I borrow money at a 4.5% interest rate, or a 5.5 interest rate, I'm just throwing that out. And I decided that I wanted to refinance. Let's say it's my home equity, the equity in the home. I just wanted to refinance. And I wanted to refinance for the purpose of being able to liquidate some credit card debts that I had. Would you go in and, because I want to deal with this immediate problem, go ahead and refinance and the interest rate is elevated to a higher amount or equivalent amount of what I already have? Or would it be prudent on my part to refinance and liquidate my debt while achieving a lower interest rate to ensure a lower payment for the refinancing? So I think that all of these factors...
Okay, but wait, was that a question to me?
No, I'm just saying to you, because I went back to the Senate history. I went back to when, I think it was in June, July, that they had passed...
Tell him I'm coming up.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just reflecting back on certain amendments that the senators had put in the first package that they had passed, where they had placed a cap. I think it was 3% or 3.5%. I can't remember exactly, but I could always pull the legislation. And in this borrowing package, they have 5.5%. Now, if we sit down to really determine what is our accumulated interest rate in terms of consolidating our debt, averaging our debt, it probably would be around 5-point-something%. So
okay, but anyway, but I understand what you're saying. But let me get this in, because you got to show, and you know. But so listen, the legislature got the handle and the blade.
Yeah.
My whole thing is this: regardless of what the deal is, we are in the same position, or probably a worse position financially than before, relative to what you're talking about in terms of refinancing. Let me tell you, a lot of people who is in a position to refinance for a lower rate, yes, they will refinance for a lower rate. But a lot of people still refinance because to get a lower payment monthly. And a lot of times, it don't necessarily mean that they're refinancing for a lower interest rate. It's just that the balance that initially that they had was more than the balance now. So they refinance, they prolong it in time. So if they don't, most people don't look at the interest rate when you're paying $1,000 a month, and you now at 5%. But you can't even afford to pay the $1,000 a month. But if you refinance for 6%, but because of the balance is substantially lower now, then when you initially borrow, that $1,000 a month will come down to maybe $600. You know, refinance so you could survive.
Well, I'm not disagreeing. With
I
you.
don't really. But in all fairness, Senator Dunstar, I am not buying that thing about the administration will go to borrow money for a higher interest rate. The whole purpose, relatively, to this whole thing, the whole objective in terms of refinancing was because the interest rate was initially dropped, and this was an opportunity for the Virgin Islands to refinance. Now, if the legislature in their eyesight.
Well, I think the point that you're trying to get to is, if you're saying no, then come with a counter proposal. Come with a counter proposal. Put something on the table. But these issues need to be addressed.
But I gotta go down. But let me ask you this: what different position is the Virgin Islands government in now relative to before the whole refinancing thing come down? We in worse position. They don't, like I tell you, it's because of the legislature have the authority over the GRS why we ain't in the 42% cut. If in the event that the legislature had that the GRS authority, they'll cut it.
Yeah. And you have anyway,
I gotta go. That's what I got to say.
No, but thanks for your input.
You are correct. Something is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
thanks for your input.
Bye.
Bye. Well, you know, that caller is very emotional. Well, not even emotional. He's absolutely right. You know, it can't be no all the time, and nothing is being offered, nothing is being put on the table. And I think that's where a couple of the senators them had actually proposed or come to the table with different entities that they feel was prepared to make an investment in the Virgin Islands and perhaps provide some of the same dynamics or some of the same opportunity to the Virgin Islands government in extending that arm. And you know, again, I'm going to say they're right in a certain respect. It can't always be no, and you not propose something. And I think that the Senate, with their authority, should start sitting down to perhaps entertain other things. Because I know a letter was read into the record about one of the entities being sued, and it actually may have caused that whole thing to be derailed. But there's a couple of things that need to go into place, and that's just my opinion. And I value the opinion of all the callers. And like I said, I'm going to say when you're right. But I think that ultimately the point that they wanted to get to, it can't be no and then you don't offer something. There has to be a counter proposal, and they need to bring forward some creative and innovative ideas on their part if you're going to just, you know, shut that thing down. But I saw the concerns myself with the package, and I ain't talking about no letter that they read into the record. I'm talking about you know, some of the stuff that I saw in there and what we would be relegated to. And my bigger concern is down the road. If we engage and have this obligation down the road, would we have the revenues coming in to sustain it? Because just like a lot of different jurisdictions, as a result of COVID-19 shutting pretty much every economy down, what type of revenues we're going to have coming in for the next year? Because starting in January, well, we're in a different fiscal year now. I would be curious to see what are the real, you know, the realistic or the current, the actual, I'm going to use actual revenues coming in now. What are the actual numbers? So we can determine that once we calculate on an average scale going down the line and going back to maybe previous year, 5-year span, to be able to calculate what the forecast, it cannot be as normal today because of the COVID-19. So I'm not sure we would be able to fulfill our obligation in paying back those notes. So if we could achieve the lowest possible interest rate and change some of the conditions and perhaps even earmark, you know, it takes, there has to be some negotiations to take place between both entities. You got, on one side, they proposed something, but on the other side, they scrutinized it and didn't feel that it was the perfect package and in the best interest of Virgin Islanders. So we'll have discussions on that in the future. I'm down to the end of the hour. Actually, I exceeded the hour, And I just wanted to do a little catch up here and play a commercial by one of my main sponsors, Catch of the Day, located down in Cookie Point Beach. And you got First Stop gas station and convenience store. Have you guys been in there to see all the different electronic devices and what they have available in there? It's one of the places that I go to get my gas. And interesting enough, you know, they have 93 gas now, which I think a lot of people high octane using their gas to preserve and protect and keep the engines running properly. But folks, have a wonderful Monday and a productive week. God bless each and every one of you. Is Catch of the Day. From the water to the pot to your mouth, everything is fresh at Catch of the Day, located on Cookie Point Beach. Enjoy some of your favorite seafood dishes. Fresh catch, lobster, tongue, and whelks when in season, as well as surf and turf. They cater to your wishes. While you sit and wait for your food, enjoy the friendly bar and bask in the ambience that is second to none. Enjoy the white sand, sun, and crystal blue water. We are sure the experience will be unique. Monday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Come and enjoy Catch of the Day on Cookie Point Beach.